take it and use it to your advantage. We pray, God, for those in our members, those members of our group that in our congregation who are sick, we pray, Lord, that you would heal them and make them well. For those who've had to move to different places, we pray, Lord, that you give them the confidence in you, Lord Jesus, and the ability to deal with the changes in their life. We pray for the Lady Ray, Lord, she'll heal fast. We thank you, Lord, for people who can provide services for children like her. We pray, Lord, for each of us now as we go into this lesson, as you open our hearts and minds, help us to understand the word as we see it and read it in your Bible. We pray this prayer in Christ's holy name. Amen.
If you look at the upcoming lessons, it's the Godhead. There's 5 lessons on God and kind of God the Father, 4 lessons on Jesus, and then 4 lessons on the Holy Spirit. So, interesting study, one that a lot of people shy away from sometimes, but I think I know it's something we need to learn and study and look.
Not as much as the book of Revelation.
Not as much as the Book of Revelation. Yeah, so people shy away from that.
Yeah, they run.
Yeah, I mean,
Even preachers.
even preachers. Now what was that? We did go through that back a while back, but you can always go back. You can always, every time you go through it, you see something maybe that you didn't quite see before, or learn something along the way as well, I hope. But as we look at as we look at the Godhead beginning next week, I hope we'll dig into that and look at it and realize truly who God is. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and some things along that line. But we need to finish up with Solomon today, or if we should finish up this morning. We'll see how that goes. Solomon's fame. I mean, what do you know about Solomon? What is he famous for? Wisdom, okay. Riches. The Queen of Sheba came because she had heard of his fame. Okay. Yeah, I mean, when she heard of his fame, she came to Jerusalem, and I remember I think she'd heard of his fame. Most of the time, you think about she saw all the great wealth that he had and all of that. But what's the first thing it says? She came to Jerusalem to test Solomon with hard questions, and having a very great retinue, camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. She had these great questions that she wanted to ask Solomon. So she traveled a great distance to come and to see him and to check on, to learn about his wisdom, to get answers to questions she had. She traveled more than 1,200 miles. And it says she came from the ends of the earth, Matthew 12:42 says, to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Even today, 1,200 miles is a long trip, isn't it? It is to me anyway. I've been watching some of these different people, watching Theresa and Earl travel on their vacation, and I think Brent and Lisa Missildine, Brent and Shannon Rice, going different, like Alaska, Hawaii, then some out in the west, and you watch, and boy, there's just a lot of traveling involved. Some go by airplane, or others driving as well, but just going 1,200 miles today would be a great undertaking. But imagine back in that day and age with the transportation that they had, it was a long ordeal. Why would she travel so far? I mean, just to ask some questions. You think there's any more involved in it than that? Sometimes you have to see it to believe it, don't you? I mean, you ever heard somebody bragging about something? You say, I want to see for myself. And sometimes you see for yourself and realize they exaggerated quite a bit. Other times, okay.
1,200 miles.
Let's go over here. Right. It's from, let me find it. I was trying to. On page 134, top of the page, Sheba was located in the southern portion of Arabia, more than 1,200 miles away. And I was trying to see if I had a map that actually showed. Yeah, kind of Iran. Okay. Yeah, so kind of, Yeah, it's, like, in other words, here's, most of y'all probably can't see this, but Israel in that area, Arabia, the southern part of that, it'd be across the Nile, or the Red
Most of
Sea.
it was on land, very little was on water.
You have a little bit of area up there at the top. Well, no, actually, it's cut off. It's cut off up in that area. So yeah, it would be on the Red Sea. But as far as the Mediterranean, no. And some will say, that she needed that port up there too. Solomon had built a brand new port city, and it would be nice for her to get her questions answered, but she would love to have that port city access on the Mediterranean, especially when you have all these traders coming to trade with Israel, with Solomon. It'd be nice for her to get a cut of that, or be able to have a trade route for them to put. They were known for spices as well, and to have that go and other stuff come in. So you're coming down below. I mean, like if you have Egypt over this way, it's Arabia on that side. I always want to put it over here for some reason, but it's down in Arabia. But down toward the Red Sea. So, again, a doable trip, sure, but a long trip to say the least. But she had heard about Solomon, and as Jimmy said, you go see it for yourself. Is it really true? Because things can get exaggerated. We see that today, but it always amazes me when you read a story on, you get on the news or you get on Facebook, read a story, and there's times I'll look at it and I'll say, I know that's not true. There's no way. I mean, it's something that's kind of in my wheelhouse of expertise, and I'll say, that's not right. And then people will call them out for it because it's on the internet, it's not necessarily true. And a lot of things are exaggerated as well. And so people traveling, coming from down through Israel, down to Sheba, as well in that area in Arabia, had seen for themselves, and she'd been hearing the stories. I mean, boy, you should see what's going on up there with Solomon. You should see the kingdom that he has, the great wealth that's there, the wisdom of Solomon is also. And so she went to get questions answered. They couldn't get online. They couldn't get on the internet and look it up. They couldn't go to Wikipedia for whatever that's worth. Didn't have a set of encyclopedias like we would. But she had questions she wanted answered. She wanted to see for herself what he was like. And I'm sure there was some politics involved as well, some trade negotiations or whatever also that would be a part of it. It's good to get along with your neighbors. And so a lot of different things involved in that. And so, but she comes, even though he has so much, she brings a great abundance of things as well. I mean, she didn't travel without a great entourage with her. I mean, very great retinue, a company of people working for her and with her. She had spices, gold, precious stones. And so she just poured her heart out to him. Any questions she had, she asked him. And so Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing so difficult for Solomon that he could not explain it to her. You ever have somebody ask you a difficult question and you may not know the answer, you may not know the answer, you just have to say, look, I just don't know. Or if you know the answer, I had a calculus teacher in college that said, look, I know how to do this. I'm not a good teacher. I was thinking, why are you up here teaching? But I'm not a good teacher. You just have to watch me and try to figure it out yourself. But, he knew how to do it, but he couldn't explain it to you. And that was one of my biggest. I had like a 5-hour class. It was a 5-hour class, and I made a C in it, which I did not like making a C. I mean, that brought my GPA down. I was not very happy about that. But not that I remembered all these years later. But anyway, he didn't have one that he said, look, I can't explain it to you. He didn't have a situation where he said, I don't know. Whatever question she had, God had given him the wisdom that he was able to answer, even the difficult questions, and he could explain it to her. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, I mean, she saw that indeed he is wise. And it had to stand out to her that, I would imagine to others, this isn't just natural wisdom. I mean, you can see that it comes from God. But then also she began to look around. The house that he had built was an amazing house. She looked at the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers and their apparel, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord. there was no more spirit in her. I mean, she noticed all the little details. You ever get into a situation like, we'll go somewhere and we'll get back and Rachel started asking me questions. And I didn't notice anything. I just oblivious to the decorations, oblivious to the house, whether it was really nice or not nice or clean or messy or whatever. I didn't. But she might notice more than I do. Looking at the details. Maybe I need to look more at some of the details as well. But here's a woman that was looking at the details. But I mean, again, they were very obvious. They were standing out. I mean, you could look at the way the servants were acting, the way they were treated, the clothes that even the servants were wearing, the place settings that were there at the table, whatever it may be. I mean, it just kind of took her breath away. There was no more spirit in her. Have you ever just been awestruck? And here she was awestruck. Maybe. I mean, yeah, I mean, here's a queen of a nation that's, and she's used to having her royal entourage with her and people giving her respect, and all of a sudden she's been outclassed, outdone. Yeah. I imagine that was a little humbling to her. She may have hoped to go and outshining. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, I do think it had to have humbled her. It doesn't say that. I mean, she praises him. She praised him. Now, whether that was politics involved or just whatever else, I mean, I do think it just took, literally, it said her spirit left her. It took her breath away completely. I mean, maybe, like you said, it could mean it humbled her as a part of it as well. That what can you do? You cannot argue against what you're seeing there. And she said to the king, "It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. I heard about your words. I heard about your wisdom, and it's true. However, I did not believe their words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. You exceed the fame of which I heard." I mean, she didn't have to heap it on that much, did she? But she did. I mean, she's evidently being very honest there, saying, I heard some great stories, but,
The thing that made her awestruck so much
Right.
was the divine guidance of Solomon in wisdom to do things that other people never thought of until you see it. The things he would know, things like husbandry and taking care of plants, all that. I mean, when you study all of it, you know he knew all that. And God had to just put it in his head. He couldn't live long enough to know all that.
Right. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of heaps of gold everywhere, but it's the wisdom involved that you say, whether you look at the way he had the house laid out, whether you look at the way he did his gardening, everything showed true wisdom from God. I mean, like,
You've never seen that before.
no. And I mean, again, it's all from God, and that, if anything, his wisdom should make people like, boy, if God does that for him, how much wisdom does God have? If he can give Solomon, how wise is God? I mean, you should be able to put two and two together and come to that conclusion. But like you said, the thing that really struck her was that wisdom that was there.
She was not a Jew, but she didn't really comprehend the power of God.
Because, I mean, you look at these gods and goddesses of the pagans, I mean, they can talk about how great their God is, but when have they ever seen their God do anything? They never had. I mean, they may claim, oh, that earthquake was our God doing that. That storm, that lightning bolt that went down came from our God. But as far as really seeing God in action or the results there, and you look at Solomon and his God-given wisdom, there's no doubting that. And then you look at him putting that into action, not just with the questions and the answers, but in everything around him, how it's laid out, how it's carried out, everything about you. Look, the half has not been told. You exceed the fame of which I've heard. Happy are your men. Happy are those your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God who delighted in you, setting you on his throne to be king for the Lord your God. Because your God has loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore he made you king over them to do justice and righteousness.
That passage right there tells you she didn't know God.
Right.
God is your God,
Right.
not my God.
Right.
not our God.
Yeah, the God of Israel, not the God of Sheba or of the Queen of Sheba. Yeah, I mean she's not a proselyte of any sort, but I think at this point she's beginning to realize there's something special about the God of Israel, about His God, so to speak. He has delighted in you. Look how He has blessed you. You know, it's kind of like Nebuchadnezzar when he was humbled. Here's the Queen of Sheba humbled, and he said, God's made you king over them. I mean, He's blessed you in so many ways. You look at even your servants. Look how happy they are. And I don't know if she meant, you know, some will say that maybe they were happy because they were being treated well, and they got to enjoy great, you know, living in the king's house. They enjoyed some of the king's blessings as well. Others will say she meant it from the point of view, boy, they're so fortunate to be able to be here in your presence all the time. They are blessed, they're happy from being able to hear your wisdom day in and day out, and to see it and to experience it. But now she turns around, she tries to give the king something. She gives him 120 talents of gold. A talent, I was reading, was somewhere around 75 pounds. I didn't do the math out, but if you do 120 times 75, that's a lot of pounds, and then multiply that by 16 to get your ounces. That's a lot of gold, a valuable amount of gold. Spices in great abundance, precious stones. There never were any spices such as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So spices that were unknown in Israel. I mean, she had the spice rack full. She had a lot of spices to give to him, and you know, sometimes we may take certain spices for granted, but back in that day and age, they were an expensive commodity to have some of these rare spices. Also, the servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon who brought gold from Ophir brought algum wood and precious stones. So he's saying, look, the Queen of Sheba brought all this, but he has others bringing gifts to him on a regular basis. The king made walkways of the algum wood, and we really don't know what kind of wood that was for sure. Some will say, judging from the areas, it was sort of a reddish type of wood, you know, just something that's very beautiful, that stood out, very ornate. It does not say. He made walkways for the house of the Lord and for the king's house. Also harps and stringed instruments for singers. There were none such as these seen before in the land of Judah. So they're getting things from abroad. I mean, other nations bringing in items that would not be there in Israel, but that you can, you know, we're used to getting things shipped from around the world to us and take it for granted, but they would not have had that ability, but now it's coming in and they're experiencing new things. Now King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired, whatever she asked, much more than she had brought to the king. So you ever tried to give somebody something and they outgive you back? You know, I've had certain ones over the years that were that way to us. My mind just went blank as to, I was fixing to say something about a certain person. Good night. Anyway, going up, I remember one instance, went over to somebody's house, and Sister Law, that's who it was. I was trying to remember who it was. Went over to Sister Law's house, and she had not been feeling well, and we gave her some food to eat, and she wound up, I think she baked a cake and some other stuff for us to send back. And I said, that's not the idea of this, you know, we're supposed to be helping you, and here you are cooking for us. And she said, well, I had to give you something, you know, okay. And she's not the only one, there's others as well, but, you know, here the Queen of Sheba was trying to give an impressive gift to the king, and he gives back more than what she gave. And he said she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. So she went back wealthier than she had come. The weight of gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666 talents of gold, a lot of gold. And it said that's the income that's coming in, or maybe the tax revenue, I guess you could say, besides what the traveling merchants and traders brought. And all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. So they're all, you know, bringing gold and silver into it. And so Solomon took some of that. He made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of hammered gold went into each shield. Big, beautiful shields. He made 300 shields of hammered gold. 300 shekels of gold in each shield. The king put them, the the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. I mean, you have the ivory, which is beautiful, but then you have the pure gold over the ivory as well. And imagine that beautiful golden ivory throne, and then there's 6 steps leading up to it. There's a footstool made of gold, which was fastened to the throne. There were armrests on either side of the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the armrest. So, and I think the idea of the lions is not live lions, but statues of lions. 12 lions stood there, 1 on each side of the 6 steps. So, you have the lion on each side of the throne, you have the lion on each side of each step as well. Nothing like this had been made for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Not one was silver, for this was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. Silver wasn't worth much. I mean, there's so much wealth, you had to have gold for it to be valuable at all. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram once every 3 years to the merchant ships. Once every 3 years the merchant ships came, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. What's the purpose of the apes and monkeys? Entertainment purposes, I suppose. It's just interesting to me. Whatever he wanted, he could get. You look at some of these wealthy people today, and it amazes me the animals that they collect, and some legally, some illegally, but people get out there and play with their so-called pet tiger or lion or whatever. There was one guy I was reading a story about. He wasn't wealthy, but he had raised a hippopotamus in a pond behind his house from the time it was a baby. Well, guess what the hippopotamus did when it got big? It killed him. They found him floating around in the pond. The man, by the way. But still, people collect different things, and here among all the things, the gold, the silver, animals that you might not expect there as well, just oddities, if you will, things that were unusual. It's just a total amazing sight to see, and so King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. Remember, God gave him the wisdom, but now God's blessed him with the riches that come as well. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. So they're all wanting to see for themselves, and they're wanting to hear from him. Each one wants an audience with the king. Each man brought his present, articles of silver and gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, mules, at a set rate year by year. So they have to come bearing something that's worth something. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, 12,000 horsemen whom he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. So you have quite a few horses, quite a few chariots, and the men taking care of them. He reigned over all the kings from the river of the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. The king, so the land expanded greatly. He reigned over all the kings from the river to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. He made cedar trees as abundant as sycamores, which are in the lowland. And they brought horses to Solomon from Egypt and from all lands. And so, great wealth. I mean, you can kind of just picture that in your mind. But it says, but like the Queen of Sheba said, if you try to picture it in your mind, you won't picture it as grand and as amazing as it was. Any comments on that part? Go over to the book of Ecclesiastes. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. And notice some things there that Solomon had to say. Here's Solomon, the man of great wisdom, Solomon with all the great riches. I mean, we look at all his wives and concubines that he had. And in Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 1, it says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. That narrows it right down, doesn't it, to who it is, Solomon. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? You look at all the wealth that Solomon had, all the glory that was his. What happened when Solomon died? Who got it? Somebody else?
Misguided sons.
A misguided son, yeah. Excuse me? Rehoboam, yeah. He got it, and then he like as I said up here, he was misguided. He didn't use his power and position and wealth in the right way and blew the kingdom apart. But he said, look, one generation passes and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rose. The wind goes toward the south and turns to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. And he goes on talking about all the things. And you go on down to verse 9, that which has been is what will be, that which is done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. So you say, oh, look, there's something new, but it's been before in some shape, form, or fashion. Skip on down to verse 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Is that true? Is it all, we look around, is it all vanity and grasping for the wind? Okay, the physical is? Everything physical? Okay. If we put our heart and soul into just getting more here, as he said earlier, you're going to die and leave it to someone else one day. If that's where you're trying to find true joy, true happiness, it doesn't fulfill you. People that hunger and thirst after material things aren't filled, but if you hunger and thirst after righteousness, you'll be filled. And you begin to go through, and he kind of talks about some of these things. Verse 16, I commune with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who are before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this too is grasping for the wind. He said, I tried to find the answer and the purpose in life in the wisdom that's been given to me and to get more wisdom and to understand more. And he thought, boy, if I use that and just keep learning. But he said, even that's not the answer in and of itself. Because he says, in much wisdom is much grief. He who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Sometimes it'd be better, what do they say, ignorance is bliss. Adam and Eve wanted to be wise like God. They learned some things. They didn't like the answers they found out because of their sin. You go into chapter 2. He said, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this was also vanity. He said, I tried to find it in pleasure. Verse 3, I searched my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. So I tried to find it in wisdom and knowledge. That wasn't the answer. I tried to find it in just enjoying pleasure, and that really wasn't the answer. He said, verse 4, I made my works great. I built my houses and planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. And that's what you was talking about earlier. I built the water pools from which to water his growing trees of the grove. You have this aqueduct system. You have this, water that's provided. It's amazing what he did and everything he did. He had all the servants you could imagine, left, right, everywhere. Verse 9, I became great and excelled more than all who are before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. That's another thing. God didn't take that wisdom away as I went through these things. You look at verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. For my heart rejoiced in my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. And so he continues on. In verse 13, I saw that wisdom exceeds folly, as light exceeds darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. And so, he's just saying, look, wisdom is better than some of these other things. Going over a few chapters, we won't look at everything, but chapter 4, verse 13, we'll pick up there. Better is a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. Yep. Do you think we can figure out who that old and king was that was foolish? Probably looking at himself, isn't he? For he comes out of prison to be king, although he is born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and grasping for the wind. If you rise from the lowest rank up to the highest rank, if you are king over all the world, eventually you'll go, and people will forget who you are, maybe along the way, or not really respect you as they should. His son came in, and look what happened there as well. But he said, look, I tried everything I could. And you go through the whole book of Ecclesiastes, I mean, he's trying his best just to find answer, meaning, purpose in life. And he just said, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And you look at his life, it really sums that up, doesn't it? I mean, you look at all the wives and the concubines he had, thought that'd bring him happiness and pleasure. And what was the end result of those relationships that he had? They pulled him away from God, didn't they? Because he was trying to make them happy rather than really please God and serve him, and been going after idols, idolatry as well. And in his wisdom, if he'd really listened to it, he should have known. But he gets down to the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, and my page is turned here. What did he finally figure out was the answer of it all, the purpose? To fear God and keep his commandments. Go to the very end of the book of Ecclesiastes. Yeah, a book of regret. Ecclesiastes 12:8. Do what? What now?
The last statement.
Makes it.
Fear God and keep his commandments. Obviously, he did not.
Do you think Solomon ever turned it around in his life?
Scripture doesn't say he did.
It doesn't say.
You read it into inference in that last.
Yeah, you don't know at that point. Well, let's go down here to verse 13 of chapter 12. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. The Bible doesn't really say what happened to Solomon at the very end. You got to hope that maybe as those words were penned, he had learned his lesson and straightened up. And, it'd be late in life that if he did. But you see others who, that were wicked kings that straightened up at the end and God forgave them. But he does give the right answer there, whether he followed it himself or not. But in verse 8, he says, vanity, vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. It's kind of interesting. Back in verse 6, Ecclesiastes 12, you go back to really verse 1 of 12. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw not near when you'll say, I have no pleasure in them. Don't put off obedience to God. Don't put off faithfulness, because one day your heart may be too hardened, or you just don't have that desire, and you kind of wonder if that was his attitude. But verse 6 says, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Kind of a beautiful picture painted there of death. The silver cord is loose, the golden bowl is broken, the pitcher shattered at the fountain, the wheel broken at the well. But then the dust returns back to the dust, and the spirit to God who gave it. And what's going to happen then? You look at Solomon, he had gained all these things, fame, fortune, so many blessings that God had blessed them with, and the wisdom to use it. He accomplished great things, but he allowed his heart to be pulled away from God. He allowed himself to, even with all his wisdom, it didn't force him to make the right decisions. I can tell you what you need to do, but it's different when it's me. I can convince myself or delude myself in thinking I'm okay the way I am. And I can see in you that, no, it's not going to work out. But with me, I can try to justify it. And Solomon seemed to do the same thing. Solomon, the bottom line for us is we have to fear God. There's not enough fear of God in the world. I mean, it's the beginning of wisdom. It's beginning of knowledge. That reverence, that respect for God. People have a difficult time understanding the severity of God. God is a good God. God is good. God is love. But that doesn't take away you have the mercy of God, but you also have the righteousness of God too, and the justice of God. It's what? Yeah, the justice of God. And so, do we fear God? Many people don't believe in Him. Others just think that He is okay with everything and anything. I was listening to somebody, one of the politicians, back several months ago. Don't remember who it was now, but talking about that abortion was very biblical, and that almost like any good Christian would believe in abortion being fine. That it's just normal health care and the rights that God has given you or whatever. And I'm thinking, how can you put those words into God's mouth or claim those come from God? And yet people don't really fear God. You can kind of justify whatever you want, and they don't get struck down immediately by blaspheming who God is and what God's word says. That they continue to stand and have their power, and they think, okay, it's all okay. I can say what I want to say. Well, you can, but one day we'll give an account. I mean, he says God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so what do? We fear God. We respect Him. We reverence Him. Now, I mean, we love Him, and He loves us, but there's got to be that reverence and respect. We fear Him and keep His commandments. His commandments, not ours or what we want, but keep His commandments. And again, Solomon veered away from a lot of that, and but we can learn one of two ways. I've had people tell me, I'll give you some advice. You can take it or leave it. You can learn from my mistake, or you can learn it the hard way. And sometimes I've learned the hard way. Sometimes I learn from theirs. But learn from Solomon. Even if you had it all, even if you had, what you think you would need to have in order to be happy, understand true happiness, true contentment, true satisfaction is only found in one place: fearing God and keeping His commandments. This is man's all. Or, some versions say this is the whole duty of man, or this is man's all. Any other comments or thought?
Mark, I see this as Solomon trying to attain something impossible for a human being to attain. If he cannot understand God Himself, God gave him the wisdom, and using God's wisdom, he couldn't understand. So he comes to the conclusion that it's best to just fear God and keep His commandments and stop all this foolishness trying to understand.
Well, he's trying to understand everything and anything, and there's some things that we may not fully understand this side of eternity, and there's no way we can fully comprehend God. And so that does come back to, look, the bottom line is God, fear Him, keep His commandments. Yeah, so there's some humility involved in that. Like the Queen of Sheba, we come before God, and the half hasn't been told, of the wisdom of God, the majesty of God, the power of God, the love of God as well. And it should humble us also. Other thoughts? With in wisdom, there's they become food. Yeah, there's a difference between godly wisdom and earthly wisdom. I catch myself a lot of times listening to people spout off what they think is just some very wise statements and how smart they are, and I've had people look down on me as, oh, you're a minister, and you can just see that judgmental look. I may deserve to be looked down on. I don't know, whatever, but it's not because I'm a preacher. I mean, that's not, I may not be as smart as some people are, but I hope I'm smart enough to know what the difference between right and wrong. But you look at some scoff at spiritual wisdom, and they get very snobbish, looking down on that, and they professing themselves to be wise, they become fools. And there's a lot of foolish people in the world today. What were you going to say, Billy?
I was going to say, worldly wisdom is vanity of all that.
Right.
Spiritual
and who he is and our relationship toward him and heading toward the home he's prepared for us one day. Lot to learn. We looked at Saul earlier, and David and Solomon. We'll turn to a different study and look at the Godhead. If you don't have a book, there's some up front.